Calle, Florida was published as part of the state-commissioned photo book Buenos Aires 1936, Visión Fotografía de Horacio Coppola, a project commemorating the 400-year anniversary of the foundation of the city through the exhibition of its modernized cosmopolitan spaces in photographic form. As we will discuss, the visual urban narrative created by Coppola through this series of photos is highly intentional. The subject matter and framing of the city can be viewed within the wider social context of economic and everyday changes and the avant-garde movement, which was a response to this. Coppola collaborated with his wife Greta Stern, a prominent photographer at the forefront of the avant-garde movement and a member of the Bauhaus collective. Her photos, photo montages, and typographic work frequently displayed proto-feminist sentiments and were often aimed at the growing female readership of cultural publications such as Ilio. Stern and Coppola shared a studio and collaborated on exhibitions and projects such as Buenos Aires 1936. In fact, the second publication of the photo book prominently featured a photo montage created by Stern. With the proximity of this proto-feminist influence in mind, we will interrogate the central position of La Mujer Moderna in this photo through the lens of social discourses, particularly those of changing gender roles and shifting economic dynamics. Coppola's choice to enshrine the modern woman in this project is suggestive of the increasing public presence of women in the metropole, a space envisioned in this project as the forefront of modernity and at the helm of Argentine society.
In Calle, Florida, Coppola captures the visual, architectural change in Buenos Aires as a symbol for the greater social change taking place at the time. Following a shift towards local manufacturing, Buenos Aires became a fertile land of job opportunities, where the dream of upward mobility was feasible. Increased European immigration led to the rapid growth of the population and the economy. Over time, the middle class grew, narrowing the social gap and reinforcing aspirations of individual success, as well as strengthening national pride. The sign at the centre of the image reads, Para la Mujer Moderna, for the modern woman. The sign illuminates the frame, symbolising the commodification of modernity. At the time of the photo in 1936, a shift from shopping for necessity to shopping for desire took place. The average middle-class citizen felt heard for the first time, with marketing aimed to meet their demands. The act of shopping became a simple pastime. Although not everyone could afford to shop for luxury goods, the display of them in windows, like the stockings and shoes we see in the window at the bottom left of the photo, was a reminder of what one could achieve in a city of burgeoning success. See the cluster of neon signs. One glows in the shape of a fan, another climbs up the side of a building. A symphony of illuminated letters and shapes retreat down Calle, Florida, until they eclipse into the background. Coppola's use of first-person perspective relays the idea that the street is stretching far ahead and behind the viewer, capturing the eruption of consumerism through the change in urban environment. The long exposure used to produce the image creates a blurred effect on the heads of the civilians passing through the bottom of the frame. This sense of anonymity promotes the idea that the modern lifestyle was achievable for all. Jane Tormey describes Eugene Atget, who documented modernisation in early 20th century Paris, as using the city's physical fabric as a backdrop for the life of the people living there. Through comparisons like this, we can clearly see Coppola's employment of a similar method in his documentation of Argentina's capital city, the so-called Paris of South America, capturing the modern lifestyle adopted by a burgeoning middle class to celebrate the opportunities available in Buenos Aires for its 400th anniversary as a city.
Coppola's Calle, Florida not only documents the city's flourishing commercial life, but also the growing presence of women within it. In the early decades of the 20th century, Buenos Aires experienced major developments in infrastructure with the opening of the subte in 1913, the first underground railway line of the southern hemisphere. This, paired with the widening avenues and overall beautification of the city, allowed women who had previously led majorly domesticated lives in suburbia to enter the urban centre and integrate freely into the crowd, as seen along the shop fronts in the image. The modern woman also had more free time. By 1936, the birth rates of Argentinian women had declined greatly in comparison to the previous century due to a shift towards the concept of voluntary fertility, which was the idea that reproduction was now optional and not solely natural. Complementing this, the modernisation of the city offered women new opportunities for education and work. By the 1930s, more women were attending secondary schools and even entering universities, while factory jobs and clerical jobs in the city expanded rapidly due to demand. Calle, Florida is a representation of the autonomy of the modern woman, somebody who could socially afford to dedicate time to participating in the vibrant urban space. And this female presence is further highlighted in another one of Coppola's pictures, Vista de la Calle Florida desde la Esquina, which is taken in the same street. And when we look at the images together, Coppola presents the modern street as a shared social space where women do participate fully in urban life. In Calle, Florida, women are integrated naturally amongst the people, with the motion blur effect producing a dynamic atmosphere which in turn heightens the comfortability of modern women in this environment, while the crowd around them also does suggest that the female presence in public was becoming normalised if it wasn't already. However, in Vista de la Calle Florida desde la Esquina, Coppola highlights the female solidarity as we see two women linking arms as they walk down the street, which juxtaposes the more traditional norm that women were to be accompanied by their husband or male family members. By embedding the women within the identity of the street, Coppola avoids isolating them, and instead his focus on a combination of the architectural depth as well as human presence transforms the modern street into a collective environment which offers a visual demonstration of how modernity in the city facilitated women's participation in public life.
Coppola clearly blurs the lines between awe and elevation towards modernisation, with apprehension to these changes within Argentine identity and its complexities in the Latin American world. Despite the economic and social benefits of modernisation in Buenos Aires, such as expansion of the middle class and public transport, such as the first trams in Latin America, there was a more nuanced level of anxiety towards modernisation and what it meant to the inhabitants of Buenos Aires. One way in which this is clear through his photography is to highlight the social issues of consumerism as a pastime. In the photograph, the use of neon lettering "Para la mujer moderna" demonstrates the guise of liberation, when in actuality reaffirming the role of women and subjugating them in traditional gender roles. As while it attempts to provide them with an identity of una mujer moderna, it nevertheless boxes them back into the same pre-existing packaging of reliance on their husband's income. With the growing population and economic expansion within the mid-1900s in Argentina, there was a growing culture surrounding women's participation in the public sector, shopping as a pastime with their friends or their husbands. This is demonstrated through Coppola's other works photographed on the same street, depicting women shopping as they walk leisurely dressed in fashionable European clothes. Through his photography, Coppola emphasises the paradox of Argentinians searching for their identities within consumerist culture brought about by modernisation. Another offcut of the trend of modernisation that was resisted by Argentinians was the change of the identity of the individual. In the composition, the crowd on the street below the signs are captured as a blurry amalgamation of hats and obscured faces, moving as a collective. What's more is the eye-level perspective shot reflects not only what Coppola saw, but highlights the emotions behind how consumerist city made the individual feel. Not only this, but the perspective also makes the viewer themselves become part of the sea of blurry faces, becoming a member of the motion-blurred crowd, demonstrating at a deeply personal level for its audience how it feels to lose one's identity within the collective homogeneity of capitalist goals. What's more is the national identity within the country as a whole was also deeply affected by its relationship to modernity. Aníbal Quijano writes that the anxious demand for identity is stronger in the countries and among the groups where the pressures of transnationals to form a new version of the Creole oligarchical culture suggests that the booming population of people of mixed heritage from Italian, Irish and Spanish, a national collective identity was sought through the modernising image of the city. Imagery of the cityscape is essential to understanding the themes of apprehension towards modernisation through the juxtaposition of the physical human body to the long streets and large brick buildings. In the photograph, the perception of the street as disappearing into the focal point of the image, with endless roads of light along the long straight roads and neon signs contrasted against the black night sky, suggests the abundance and inescapability of the modern city. Additionally, Coppola took pictures while travelling around Europe in the 1920s, and perhaps he communicates that the lack of indication that this is a Latin American city to that of a city like Paris may call into question the indistinguishability of the national Argentinian city to that of a European one.
The interwar period saw to the rise of the New Vision photography movement. Previously, photographic styles had sought to emulate paintings, but with heavy influence from the Bauhaus movement, New Vision photography introduced its own laws of composition and lighting, using the camera lens as a framing device for the documentary and experimental. Coppola's images explore geometry and abstraction, investigating the integration of modernity into tradition, a prevalent theme within Buenos Aires at the time. Striking shots from extreme angles abstract the city, encouraging viewers to consider Buenos Aires not through a realistic reflective lens, but rather one that admires and critiques the rapidly modernizing and changing city. The location of Calle Florida fittingly reflects both the introduction of modernity and the New Vision movement into Coppola's work, with the street being well known for its galleries, studios, and art supply shops, a place where both local and migrant artists gathered, exchanged ideas, and exhibited their work. The nocturnal image presents the role of electrical lighting in creating the new landscape of urban modernity. Heavy advertising and the sign "Para la mujer moderna" dominates the composition, reflecting the societal changes of 1930s Buenos Aires, and specifically the emergence of the new woman. The new woman was indicative of a modernizing society, wearing fashionable clothes and accessories, and therefore posing as a new consumer. However, the introduction of the new female consumer enabled the exploitation of women's newly established autonomy. Whilst marketing and advertising encouraged women to spend their money to become the modern versions of themselves, prevailing domestic ideals of women as wives and mothers, reducing the individual to an unnamed collective, reinforced women's subservience to the capitalist modern society.
In the rapidly changing and increasingly urban atmosphere of Buenos Aires, the neon lights of consumption and entertainment shine above the anonymous heads of the bustling crowd, and central to this vision of growth and life is La Mujer Moderna. Coppola's use of perspective draws our gaze upwards in aspiration and anticipation of this bright future. What roles are women to play in this modernized city, and how will it match up to this image? Through our interrogation of this photo, within its wider social and artistic context, increased disposable income, time, proliferation of luxury consumer goods, and increased female emancipation into the workforce, we have found that the position of La Mujer Moderna is not as straightforward. While social and economic freedoms were being experienced on the streets of the metropole, these roles were still subject to many limitations. The modern city, 400 years after its foundation, was undoubtedly presented new opportunities for women. However, the emergence of a new prescribed gender role, which placed women in the role of the consumer in the fabric of everyday life, must also be recognized.